Hi, and welcome to Running on Carbs. I am Coach Val. I am your host and your coach. And I want to welcome you to episode number 24 of the podcast today. Today, I want to start off with a different topic, and then I'll jump into the topic that you came here to hear. But if you follow me on Instagram, where I am running.on.carbs on Instagram, you would have seen a video that I posted up to my stories. And in that video, I'm trying to bend and break a piece of an avocado, and I can't. So I got this funky fruit, which is horrible because I was I was going to eat some avocado. It was my last avocado. It was really hard to cut open. And when I did cut it open, then I couldn't get it separated from the seed inside. Finally, get it separated from the seed. And it has been sitting, by the way, on my counter for over a week. So you know avocados, right? Avocados, you set it on the counter and it's hard as a rock. And as soon as you try to go and cut into it, 2 days later, it's like mush. So that's usually the case with avocado. In this case, it'd been sitting there for more than a week because I had other avocados in the fridge that I was using up. I finally go to cut this one, and like I said, it's hard as a rock. And then when I finally get it cut open, I cut through a slice of the avocado and it won't it won't even bend. I have to like cut it, and it was super hard. And this is not a, unripened avocado. It had been sitting there for a long time. So I made a little video of it because it was just so odd. And I know I've gotten avocados before where part of it was hard like that and then the rest of it was fine, and I just chalked it up to, "Oh, this is just an, partially unripened avocado," and I cut it off and, ate the rest of it. Now I'm questioning my choices when I did that. So, anyway, this one, it was just awful the whole way through. And I'm bending it and twisting it, and then I go to peel off a piece of the peel, and it just breaks off in a tiny little piece. So I go and on the internet and start investigating and looking into this. I don't know if you've heard of this, but I definitely want to bring attention to this particular chemical that is being used on fruits and vegetables. It is from the brand name Smart Fresh. I have no idea, where you can find out what fruits and vegetables are using this, but apparently it's very widespread. It's been in use since April of 1999. At least that's when it was approved as an active ingredient. And which that in of itself is an odd saying when it comes to fruits and vegetables that are supposed to be just produce off of a tree or a vine, to call it an active ingredient in a fresh produce item. So that itself is concerning. So anyway, I went and did a little more investigating, and it turns out that there's a chemical that has been approved, like I said, in 1999, and it goes by the name of 1-methylcyclopropene, uh, otherwise short 1-MCP. That's often how you'll see it written out. And the US Department of Agriculture, there's a quote from them on their website, and it says, toxicity tests show 1-methylcyclopropene, 1-MCP, is not expected to be harmful to living organisms or the environment. I'm sorry, but not expected to be? And that's approved for human consumption? I'm floored by this. I mean, I shouldn't be, but I am. And to see this out there in our food supply, and as a plant-based individual, you know, I make choices to avoid meat and dairy and things because I don't want the additives. Um, First off, I don't want the additives that are added to the animal product agriculture. I want fresh fruits and vegetables, grains, whole grains, and I understand that there is, processing and things that happen to our food, but this is just seems to be taking it to a whole new level when you get a piece of produce that, number one, I paid a lot of money for because avocados are not cheap, just laying it out there. So I pay a lot of money for this and it's inedible. You cannot eat that food. And I hesitate to even call it food based on the texture of it and how long it sat there. So I have not done a lot of investigating or digging into this, but I certainly will continue to. But I wanted to bring it up here because if you have any information on this, send me, my way any information that you might have on this topic because I want to gather more information. I want to know what's in my food. I want to know if there's some way to avoid it, and track this a little bit more. And then, of course, if there's more information to share more broadly and widely, I will bring it to you in another episode. But for right now, I'm just sort of putting it out there that these things exist, and if you get something that's rubbery like that, it creates it almost like silicone style food. Like a friend of mine asked me if it was fake. She said, "Oh, is that a fake avocado?" No, it's not fake at all. It was bought at the local grocery store and it sat on my counter for over a week. And then I cut it open and it was disgusting. I even put a piece of like regular avocado and a piece of that avocado on a plate next to each other and put it outside where the ants sometimes go. And ants started covering the real avocado and they avoided the fake avocado. Well, I'm just going to call it fake avocado. The treated avocado, we'll call it that. How's that? So they avoided it and didn't want to go on it. And even the flies were like digging into the real avocado and just letting the other piece just sit there. And I'm sorry, if bugs and flies and ants won't eat it, why in the world am I going to put that in my body? So anyway, PSA out there. The brand name is under a brand name called Smart Fresh. And then the chemical is 1-MCP. So anyway, let me know if you hear anything about that. I would be very interested. They are spraying this, by the way, on all sorts of fruits and vegetables. If you do a Google search, you'll find several lists. Avocados are just one of them. It has been shown to help apples maintain their shelf life for a year. How does an apple sustain a shelf life for an entire year? That is so unnatural. And they spray them on blueberries that become like little silicone things, which are choking hazards for children. A lot of people give kids blueberries to snack on, and they get one of these things, and it's just rubber. It's been sprayed on watermelon. Persimmons, I think, was another one that I read. There were a number of different fruits and vegetables. Like I said, a quick Google search and you'll find it. But PSA, be aware, it is out there. And I'm interested if you've ever gotten one of these and what did you do with it? So let me know. All right. So with that, let's move on from that for the moment. We'll come back to that in another episode if need be. So let's talk about something fun. How to incorporate a tune-up race into your training plan. So the first two pillars of my coaching philosophy are number one, have fun, and number two, to build gradually. And I have 5 pillars, but those are the first 2 pillars of my coaching philosophy. And incorporating tune-up races, I think, hits both of those really well. Because tune-up races are a lot of fun. They're there to, give you something to look forward to. Racing is just fun to do. So I'll talk a bit about how we do that and the benefits of it. And also it helps you build gradually because oftentimes tune-up races are built into the plan, somewhere about midway through a race plan, depending on which plan you're doing, like what length distance you're training for. So you might do about a halfway through. You might even do 2 tune-up races depending on your plan. But they're a lot of fun to do. and it does help you to build gradually. So let's talk about what a tune-up race is. A tune-up race is either a real race or it's a simulated race that you do on your own. And you do that within a longer training plan that is for an A race. So you have a main race that you are doing a training plan toward. It could be maybe 12 weeks up to 18 weeks if you're doing a marathon. Um, and so within that race training plan, you will incorporate another race, usually at a shorter distance, depending on what it is you're training for, but typically at a shorter distance, about midway through. And were you doing that to test where you are, number one, um, and for a number of other reasons. So what distances or what distance race should you incorporate a tune-up race into? And really, as I mentioned, you can incorporate a tune-up race into any race plan distance, anything from a 5K all the way up to a marathon, even ultra marathons, which I don't typically talk about here very often. But you might do a marathon as part of a tune-up race for an ultra marathon. It's really just a shorter distance typically toward a longer distance that you're going to do in between. So 5Ks, let's talk about how you would incorporate a tune-up race maybe for a 5K. With a 5K, you might be doing, I don't know, maybe an 8 to 10 week plan, depending on where you started and what your goal is. You might need a little extra time if you're really working on that pacing and that speed. But with a 5K plan, it's fun to incorporate another 5K about midway through to test where you are. So if you are really going for a fast 5K and you want to test out how your training is going, then you can incorporate a different 5K into your race plan and run it to see maybe your pacing strategy. Is your pacing strategy working for that distance? Are there things that you might need to tweak and adjust within your training plan for your eventual A race 5K that will be at the end of your plan? I've done this before with, actually, it's funny, I have my Carlsbad 5000 shirt on at the moment. But for the Carlsbad 5000, that's always my 5K goal race. Every year I do the Carlsbad 5000. And I use that as my A race 5K to test my pacing and my speed and my endurance at the 5K distance. So earlier in the year, though, or before that, I will run a different 5K about midway through my plan just to see where I am with my training, to see if I need to tweak or adjust maybe my fueling. 5Ks for me, fueling is always challenging. It's like I've got too much fuel or too little fuel, not enough hydration, missing some salt. It's a very odd distance for me. I'm much better at the longer endurance distances than I am at the shorter ones. So for me, 5Ks, present quite a lot of challenges for me personally, just to get my own adjustments down. So I love incorporating a tune-up 5K race into my plan so that I can tweak and adjust and try things without affecting my final goal race, which is the Carlsbad 5000. For 10Ks, you might incorporate a 5K before your 10K, if your 10K is your goal race. And for a half marathon, you can incorporate either a 5K or a 10K, preferably a 10K if you're going to do a half marathon. And then for a marathon, you would incorporate a half marathon somewhere midway through your plan, keeping in mind your taper that would be coming up at the end of a marathon training plan. You don't want to put it too close to your taper either, but it's a good way to, again, test your fueling and things like that. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the benefits of why you'd want to incorporate a tune-up race into a training plan. First off, like I started with, racing's fun. So it's a lot of fun to go to the race and to be in the race environment. It really helps to break up the monotony of a training plan, because with a training plan, you are really focused and committed over a pretty long period of time if you think about it. If you're doing anywhere from a 12 to 18-week plan, maybe either whether you're doing a half marathon to a marathon. And I mean, that could be what we're talking 3 to 4 months ish, right? That's a long time to be committed day in and day out with your monotonous, easy paced running most of the time, with an occasional workout for speed, if that is your level and you're doing some speed work. But you're pretty much doing it on your own very often. And maybe on the weekends, you meet up with a run group, something like that, to help with some of the socializations. But not everybody does that. I know when I'm training, I run on my own. So I'm not with a training group or anything like that. So to be in a race environment is just fun. It's fun to get up in the morning and be excited, have something to look forward to. So when you're going to put a race into a training plan, it's usually about midway through, maybe half-ish way, somewhere around that. Um, and so you're going to be training for several weeks until you reach that race, but it really gives you something to look forward to rather than this, goal way off in the distance, months down the road. This is a lot closer. This is only a few weeks away as opposed to a couple of months away. So it helps to break up that monotony of the training plan. And in nearly every plan, no matter how experienced the runner, there's always something to practice. There's always something that you want to tweak, that you want to try. You may know the adage that says nothing new on race day. I say nothing new on race day if it's your A race. If it's a tune-up race, you may want to try something on race day in that sense, because this is your training ground, this is your testing ground. So it's not really a race, it is a training race. So you might want to try something a little different. I wouldn't go too different because obviously you want to succeed and you want to see how fast you go or your endurance and things like that, and you don't want to be thrown off by, I don't know, a new shirt that just scratches you for 13.1 miles or something. So to a degree, it's a time to try things that are somewhat new. Maybe there's some gels that you've only tried on shorter races, so you're going to try it on a longer race without trying it in your extra long race. So different things. It's also very low pressure. So when you go into a tune-up race, you don't have the same kind of pressure on yourself to perform as you might in your A race that you will have now trained for, maybe several months to get to. I know a tune-up race on the way to Boston is going to be a lot less pressure as Boston itself. So it's a nice way to incorporate that training and practice without that high pressure. When possible, in order to make it extra fun, it would be awesome if you could travel. So I am doing a half marathon. It is not my tune-up race, but I'm doing a half marathon in hopefully in Santa Barbara in a couple of months. And I will be traveling to that. So anytime you can travel for running, I think it's awesome. But when I ran the Surf City Marathon a couple of years ago, for my tune-up race, I ran the Laughlin, what was it called? The Laughlin Damn Great Race. And it was a half marathon in Laughlin, Nevada. And I traveled there from California and just made a vacation out of it. And it's so much more fun when you have something like that to look forward to. So I had a little vacation. I had a fun half marathon to look forward to. It was one of my best half marathons that I've ever run up till then. And it was just a lot of fun. I mean, just incorporating the whole package around that race was just so enjoyable. And so if you have an opportunity to do that for your race, your tune-up race, then I strongly encourage you to do that. It'll help to break up the training, and it also helps to just add extra fun to your racing. So this is the opportunity to practice everything in a race environment. So for example, If you're not very familiar with racing, or even if you are, it gives you a chance to practice your logistics and timing. So, for example, getting to and from the race, that can sometimes be a big stressor. The whole parking thing, Uber, if you're going to travel or you're going to stay near the race, things like that. The bib pickup the day before, or maybe the day of. Um, Prepping the course, so understanding what does your course look like, and planning toward that. So when I did the Laughlin race, it had hills incorporated in it. However, my eventual marathon did not have any hills really to speak of. There's a couple little inclines I heard people complaining about, but I did fine because I was practicing on hills for my half marathon. So I knew that my half marathon in Laughlin had a couple of hills in it, and so I incorporated hill work as part of my strength running plan before the half marathon. So I included that in that part of the plan. And so when I got to that race, I was strong and I was able to do those hills pretty easily, actually. Like I said, that was one of my best races up till that point. And then hill work can only benefit you later. So even if there are no hills in your eventual A race, it will help you be stronger um, before that A race anyway. Just like anything, if you want to lift something heavy, lift heavier before that, and it makes it feel a lot lighter when you pick up the one thing that was supposed to be heavy. So that's what we do in strength training all the time. It also helps you practice your warm-up routine on site. So this is really key. For example, I do a warm-up out of the um, Running Rewired book, and I don't think I can do a lot of those movements if I was on site at a race. So I would need to find a way to practice a different warm-up for on-site race. And it needs to be good enough that it's going to support my running. Fueling and hydration. So you want to practice your fueling and hydration, definitely. Um, you want to try your gels that you're using. If you're going to use whole foods, you want to test out those whole foods in a race environment. And that might be a little bit different than how you've been training with them on your training runs. Some people will stop and walk when they take a gel or take in fuel on their training runs. But if you haven't practiced how to take those while you're still running, that might be something that you want to incorporate and test on your training run or your training race, your tune-up race. I recommend that you do that during your training runs, but at at some point, you really should practice that in a race environment. Even if you are fueling on the go when you are on your training runs, you might not be running at the same pace that you will be running in a race. So this is going to give you an opportunity to fuel at your race pace. So that is a little bit different, even if you have been fueling, like I said, on the go during your training runs. It's also going to help you practice your pacing. So, and this can be, again, for any distance race, but is your pacing on track? If you're doing a half marathon in preparation for a marathon, um, maybe run that half marathon as a training run, not for time for a half marathon, but time for a marathon. So where would you be at that halfway point? What is your pacing like? What is your fueling like? Practice it as if you're doing half the run. It's also very helpful to manage race nerves. A lot of us get those race nerves. And the beauty of a tune-up race is that, again, you don't have that same level of pressure. So your anxiety might be a little bit lower, but this is a great opportunity to bring in mindfulness into your running and to incorporate that visualization. And if you're interested in any of this, I did a podcast episode on mindful running a little while back. And so this is a great time to practice that and to see if you can keep those race nerves under control and stay focused so that you can run smoothly and relaxed on your race. So, this is the time to practice that. It's also a great time to practice your clothing and your shoes. If you have a specific pair of racing shoes that you want to wear for your marathon, this is a great time on a half marathon tune-up race to wear those shoes. How do they feel? Are they comfortable? Do they get you through that half distance? And are they working for you? It's a great time to practice that. And also any clothing that you might want to wear. You may even want to wear the outfit that you're going to wear at the marathon. This would be a good time to try that and to make sure it's comfortable for that amount of time. You can also do that, of course, during any training runs that are longer, and just make sure that your clothing fits right and there's no tags or anything that are bugging you, or a seam that scratches or chafes or anything. A tune-up race is also very helpful for navigating a race course with people on it. So it's amazing. We do all of our training, and like I said, we're maybe on our own or in a small group, and you've got this big wide open street or a path or something. But typically you don't have 20,000 people with you. Whereas at a race, you could, depending on the size of your race, of course. And I have to say that navigating a large race with a lot of people is a whole skill within itself, because as you are dodging and weaving and bobbing around and trying to get around these people, you are using energy. And so this is something that if you are going to run a large race as your A race, incorporating and trying a tune-up race with a large number of people is a great practice ground. So learn to run within large groups of people, and how do you navigate that? I can't speak highly enough of incorporating a tune-up race of that nature if you are going to do a large race for your A race. It's also a great time to practice terrain. So if you're going to do a trail race, then you would want to do a trail tune-up race. I guess that could go without saying, but not necessarily. A lot of us, we live maybe in a city area, but we're training for a trail race. And so maybe you don't have the opportunity to run on trails as often as you would like. And so to incorporate a training race, a tune-up race that is on trail will really help you understand how you will navigate that. And I would say, when you're choosing that tune-up race, try to find one that's going to mimic your final race just at a shorter distance, to really practice that terrain. Some trail races are very technical. I mean, you are hopping over rocks and avoiding divots in the ground. Water creates these big, long crevices in your trail, and you're like hopping around trying to get through it. And you might call that running, but it's questionable. But that's the train. That's what you've got to practice for. So if you can find a race that is a shorter distance that gets you to your longer distance that mimics that terrain, I think that's ideal. Um, if you're going to be practicing for a road race, but you've been running on a lot of maybe packed gravel, um, dirt trails, you may want to incorporate a tune-up race that's going to be on the road. So really trying to mimic as much as you can of your A race in your tune-up race. So let's talk a little bit about how tune-up races get scheduled into your plan. Like, when do you do them, and all of that. So usually a tune-up race is going to be part of a cutback week. And a cutback week is a week where you're going to cut back in volume or number of miles. You still might keep that intensity, but it's going to be less volume at that intensity. And oftentimes you're going to replace your long run and put your tune-up race in place of that. So usually that would be on a weekend. Sometimes you might need to move things around. Like, I usually have to move my schedule around a little bit because most races are on Sundays, but I typically do my long runs on Saturdays. So I usually have to adjust my training plan just ever so slightly so that I can, incorporate the race on a Sunday rather than what's normally my cross training day. So that's something you can work with within your own plan, or if you have a coach, then the coach can help you kind of move things around so that you're not putting too much volume into one week versus another. Might take a little adjusting. In a plan, you can have, like I had said earlier, you can have sometimes one tune-up race, but sometimes if you have a longer plan, you might even have two tune-up races. So I've had plans that had a 10K incorporated into it, like a marathon plan. So it had a 10K race incorporated, and then there was a half marathon incorporated. And again, it just helps to break up that monotony and just makes it more enjoyable and fun, and you get that extra practice in. Um, so I am actually going to do a tune-up race of my own, and I'm so excited about it. It is next weekend, which this episode will come out before that race happens. And it's called the Aloha Run, and it is a 10K. And this is in preparation as a tune-up race in preparation for my half marathon that is ideally going to be in November. I'm still taking it slow, different story. But I'm staying on track and staying with my plan as much as I can, and that my body will allow me to. So I've never actually done an official 10K race. So I'm very excited about this race. And again, that's what a tune-up race is for. It gets you excited to be in that race environment. And honestly, this one I couldn't have planned it better. It's I looked at my own plan that I had drafted. If you're interested, there's a link in the show notes to my final surge plans. And I am currently following the Get Me to the Finish Line half marathon plan, which is all easy running. And it's really just for returning to running or maybe a first time half marathon plan. But it's all easy running. And I incorporated a 10K about 5 weeks in, I think it is, to the plan, and it's part of a cutback week. So, anyway, it's this race. I looked it up. At first, I was going to do a simulation, which I will talk about in a minute. And I was just going to do a simulated 10K race to test my pacing and all that. And I thought, well, what the heck? Why don't I take a look and see if there's a race out there that's local? I don't know what the chances are of there being a 10K. It seems like 10Ks are much fewer, at least in my area, than 5Ks or half marathons. So I pulled up, oh gosh, what's it called? Running USA, I think it is, which is a website that has like every race in the country on it. And I can put the link in the show notes, and I'll verify the actual name of that and link, but I'll put it in the show notes. So if you want to go there and check it out and see if you have races near you, you'll have that link. So anyway, I do a search and I look at my local area, and I couldn't believe it. There was a 10K race exactly on the weekend that I needed it. Now it's on a Sunday, not a Saturday, so I had to swap some things around, but it was perfect. So you never know what you're going to find. So take a look and compare it to your training plan and try to do an actual race. So now I'm going to do a real life 10K, my first one, in person, and it's literally down the street from my house. I think I could Uber there for probably just as much as I could drive there. I don't think I will because I think they have good parking. And as long as they have parking, I'm okay. I think parking seems to be a premium these days, but they had plenty of space, it looks like. So, anyway, super excited about that. And I'll have to let you know how it goes once I'm done with it. My plan. So, I have a plan for the 10K race. Um, I talk a lot about easy endurance pace, which is like your zone 2. and low heart rate training. That's really what I have been focused on since I've been returning to running for the last few months after my stress fracture. Um, it's really right for me at this junction of my fitness and return to running. Obviously, I had a very serious fracture, so I do not want to repeat that. So I'm really taking it easy as I return to running and being conservative. I'd rather be more conservative than overdo it and cause myself an injury. Trust me, if you had to not run for 9 months and then you finally got to be able to run, you would probably be conservative too. And if you're in that boat, I hope you're being conservative. Um, but that kind of running might not be right for you. You might be much more advanced and not have injuries. In that case, go for it. But for me, it's good. So, what I plan to do though for the 10K is because I've been doing so much easy endurance running and I'm working on low heart rate, that is scientifically supposed to transfer into faster paces and better endurance on the race uh, course. And so I plan to run the race on Sunday in a zone 3, which is more like a threshold run for that 10K. Now, I'll start off a little bit easier, as you normally do in most races of any distance, and then I'll build gradually over the first mile. And then I'm just going to run to feel. So I'm really not going to track my heart rate. I would actually prefer to see what my heart rate does at the end. So I have no plans to really check my watch during that run. I'll be wearing it and tracking it so I can analyze everything when I'm done. But really, I'm just going to go out into this 10K and just see how I feel and run it at a pace that I can sustain, that is faster than my easy run. So that's my plan. And I will do some fueling along the way. I've been testing out some new gels. That is an upcoming episode of the podcast. So I'm excited to share with you all my results once I get done with that. But right now, I'm still in the middle of testing them. So I'll be testing some more and I'll let you know how that goes. But anyway, that's my 10K tune up race plan. And so that's kind of what it would look like for you. Like you would set an intention for your tune up race. What do you want to practice? What are your goals? What is your strategy? And then you just go out and implement and analyze your results when you're done. See how it went. No pressure. You're just going to see what it looks like. So, how fast should you run a tune up race? That's a question that you might be asking. And honestly, that really depends on your A race goal. So you can do a couple of things. Number one, you could treat it as a long run. And basically, that would mean no change in your pacing. You're just treating it as a cutback week long run. So your volume is lower, but pacing stays the same. A second option would be to test your race pace at this shorter distance. So probably like if you're training for a marathon and you're going to be doing a half marathon tune-up race, then you might test your marathon pace during your half marathon to see how you can hang on to that pace and to see if you're on track or if you need to make some adjustments in your training following that race before you get to your A race. And a third option would be if you have no clue what your pace goal is. So you're just like you're running your easy runs and you're like, I have no idea what my pace goal is for this longer run that I'm running or that I'm practicing for. You can test your race pace to establish a pacing goal. So during that race, you can practice, running a little bit harder, maybe just a slightly faster than your normal easy run. If you've been doing any tempo runs, you could pick up the pace and run at your tempo pace. So there's a couple different things you can do to practice and see what is your comfortable race pace zone. And then afterwards, of course, you analyze your heart rate data and all of that and RPE and see how you're feeling during that race. And then you can incorporate those numbers after you finish the shorter distance into your future plan. So if you are working with a coach, then your coach can incorporate those paces into your training plan for future runs as you get closer to your A race goal. So last thing is, what if you can't find an in-person race? I got super lucky. I mean, like super lucky. It was just in the stars for me to have a 10K race to run that weekend. But it doesn't always work out that way. So, what if you don't have any actual races available in your area on the week that you need a cutback race? So, you can simulate all of these conditions that we're talking about. The only thing you can't really simulate are the people. So you're just gonna have to, I don't know, bob and weave across the street and see how that works. See if just kind of practice and pretend there's a bunch of people there that you're running around. Just kidding. Don't do that. And if you do, send me a video because I need a laugh. But you can practice the day of the week and the time. So if you are going to be doing a Sunday race and you do all your long runs on Saturday, try adjusting your schedule for the week so that you can make your long run on a Sunday and practice getting up early, doing your warm up, practicing your meal, your pre race meal, all at the time of the day, and then start your practice run at the same time of day as your A goal race. So you want to practice everything to the best of your ability, as close to your A race goal as possible. You want to practice your warm up routine. So if you are doing, like I do, a warm up routine that I can do in my living room, but wouldn't really translate very well to a parking lot, you want to practice the parking lot warm up, not your traditional warm up that you do in the house. So really try to simulate all of these things. Fueling and hydration. Again, this one's a little bit harder to practice unless you're really good at like planning and putting water bottles out every mile along your course around your neighborhood or something for your simulation. It's kind of hard to practice that. But I typically run most of the races that I run allow for a water bladder or a handheld or something like that. So for me, it's not usually very different. But if you're practicing for a race that isn't going to allow those things, that's something that you may not be able to practice unless you are willing to go around the neighborhood and set water out, or if you want to just do loops around your own house and practice your house being a water stop, things like that. You can, however, practice your gels. So if you're using gels for your runs, you can practice taking those on the run at a race pace. So those things you certainly can practice on your tune-up race. Again, terrain. You could always practice terrain. So if, again, you're going to do a trail race and all you have are roads, then you're going to want to set up a distance and map it out. Make sure you know where you're going, especially if it's a trail. Make sure you have good mapping for that. So we don't need you getting lost out there in the woods, but practice the terrain for that long run. And then, of course, pacing. Practice your pacing strategy. Are you going to start off at, a certain pace and then you're going to pick it up at mile 3? Or are you going to, run your hardest out the gate because it's a 5K? Even then, you don't want to do that necessarily. I think the only time you do that is if it's like a mile. But yeah, 5Ks, you still want to kind of ease into it slightly. But anyway, practice your strategy. What is your strategy and what is it going to take to get you to your finish line? And practice that during your simulated tune-up race, and see how it goes. And then take it all home afterward and analyze the data. Hopefully, you're using a sports watch for these things, but I mean, you can do all these things by RPE. It's just a little bit harder to analyze on a simulation. Whereas if you were in a actual race, they'll have chip time and things like that. So at least you can figure out by chip time if you're on track for your pacing or not. So simulation, you really kind of need a sports watch to really truly practice that. That's going to have, heart rate pacing and all of those fun things. But if you don't have one, that might not be your focus anyway, would be my guess. And maybe pacing isn't necessarily the most important thing to you, but maybe fueling strategy and hydration, things like that, are more important. So, again, make sure that you're picking out what are the things that are most important to you to practice for your A goal race and practice those things during your tune up race. Okay, that was a lot of information. I hope you got a lot out of that. I'm really excited to hear about your tune up races, and I'm really, really excited to run my tune up race next weekend. I will let you know how it goes. My very first 10K, I'm a little nervous, but more excited than nervous. Um, Only because I've only ever done a simulated 10K, in preparation for a half marathon I did a couple of years ago. There was no tune-up race in person available at that time. So I'm very excited to be doing a 10K in person with people. I think that the race is I think it's a couple thousand people, is what I remember reading somewhere. So it's just enough people that I'm going to have to dodge around some, maybe in the beginning. But anyway, I can't wait. I'll let you know how it goes. In the meantime, have a fantastic rest of your week. We'll see you here next Thursday, for another episode of the Running on Carbs podcast. And in the meantime, go and run your best life on carbs. I'm Coach Val. I will see you next time.